So I'm going to start because I know that we've got tight schedules. And today I'd love to welcome Jessica McFadden from Story Incorporated. And her and I have been chatting for quite a while, since I've been getting quite a few emails which intrigued me around recruitment marketing and employer branding, and how, in fact, stories can bring your brand to life so substantially, not only externally when you're looking for talent, but internally as well. So she's going to share wonderful stories with us today. And whilst she has done quite a lot of work in the sort of progressive markets and that, and we sort of in the emerging markets, I've given her a good brief with regard to contextualizing the fantastic success stories that she's actually done into Africa. So enriching us leaders on how we can piggyback on those stories. So this, as you'll see, is very conversational. It's a conversational, almost like fireside chat. And I'm going to be asking Jessica questions on that, and you're most welcome to put your questions in the chat box. So the reason we're here today is, as I said, I felt that being in Africa, sometimes we lose sight of the wonderful innovations and creativity and interventions that they are doing overseas, whether it be in America, whether it be in the UK, in Europe, or whatever. And with Employer Branding Africa, my mission is to obviously enrich leaders with this wonderful creativity that is working so successfully for them in their markets. Recruitment marketing and employer branding is really missed opportunities as far as I'm concerned. And with us going into the digital online media space, everyone's competing for attention and wanting to be noticed. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, Jessica and her company are bringing out such great innovations. I really believe that we need to capitalize on this. And she's going to tell us why stories matter that much more in terms of informing and shaping your brand, both internally as well as externally in the candidate marketplace. And I think with people, well, I know with people being remote these days, they are so hungry for the connection. They want to understand what people are doing at home in their remote environments. And in fact, candidates are also looking to understand what the so-called brand is all about, if or should they decide to reach out and sign up or look for opportunities within your organization. The audience that is in the room today comes from a cross-pollination of not only multinationals, but also nationals, small to medium enterprises, as well as service providers. And I think today there will definitely be some innovation that you can take home with you. So I'm not going to waffle much on. I'm going to actually get started and start asking Jessica a few questions, because this is obviously the reason we're here today. So Jessica, welcome once again, and I hope I've introduced you sufficiently, and thank you very much for affording your time to enrich our leaders here in Africa. My first question to you is really about, why are team members' stories the best content for bringing one's employer brand to life, Jessica?
Well, stories are the best way to make a connection and either help a candidate to picture themselves working there and really picture themselves as a member of the team and believe the corporate statements. So we can read a core value statement, an EVP, lots of web copy when we're researching a new position. But when you hear an employee story of somebody who's working there and thriving and experiencing Now you have brought your employer brand to life, and those statements you've made are immediately believable. And employee stories also really help integrate and engage employees too. When an employee can hear a story from a colleague, whether it's someone they work with on the daily, or whether it's somebody who's working remotely, maybe in a whole other continent, when they hear an employee story of somebody who's working here, it reinforces why they like working there and makes them have even a stronger connection with the place they already are. So there's this little graphic that we have designed. I'm the director of marketing at Stories Incorporated, and Here in Spirit are the co-founders with me today. They've really developed this philosophy, which has helped a great deal of companies in the United States and also throughout the world really bring their employer brand to life.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Thanks for that. And I think we've, again, it's really about the great employee stories. And, you know, as I said, there's so much clutter and there's so much competition for attention within the digital space. I think as soon as people start seeing not sort of dreary content, but actually see some kind of living being who is actually relatable when it comes to how they are experiencing the real deal at home, remotely working there, or having the opportunity of inclusion. All of a sudden, maybe they were disabled, or maybe it's possibly a mother or a female who wasn't able to enter the working world because of the fact that her time was limited, but now she's been given the opportunity of flexibility. So all of these things obviously can be brought to life by way of stories, as you say, inspiring people both internally and externally. Outside of the standard recruitment marketing content, have you seen an increase in companies utilizing stories when it comes to, you know, the online space and that?
Absolutely. So we have been focusing narrowly on employee stories and employer branding, recruitment marketing, employee engagement content for the last 10 years, and helping companies do that in America, North America, and also in throughout the world globally. But we have seen this take hold, and other places are doing it well too, because stories are so effective. More and more people are seeing that you can just say, our company is X, we have this. You can have a lot of empty statements, but an employee story really adds that authenticity and brings the employer brand to life and proves who you say you are. So yes, we have seen that, and it's because it works. And that content is so engaging. There's nothing like a story as far as connecting with someone, keeping them in your nurture, keeping them in your community, and also keeping them at your company too.
Okay, that's wonderful, Jessica. And I think, I mean, you know, the burning question always is, you know, the kind of return on investment. Have your clients actually witnessed the fact that there's been a better turnaround in terms of repelling the incorrect people and attracting the right ones? Because obviously, you know, people at the moment, I think in every market, the economic climate and the labor market is so volatile. It's up and down and all over the place. No one market is exactly the same. But at the end of the day, you still have a lot of candidates that are applying to one sole position. Has there been some kind of return on investment in terms of getting the right people in?
Absolutely, because an employee story paints such a true picture of culture that you can really communicate the culture of a company so much better than just saying we are X. For instance, if you hear a salesperson tell a story of how like they're working a lot and they love the intensity and they're scaling and this brings them, you know, so much joy, it's so exciting, immediately candidates can select in or out whether they want that type of pace. If you don't hear a story about that, that's really hard to just convey that in pure web copy or a job description. We see that all the time. Go getter, someone who, when you hear someone saying, I love this. Conversely, if you hear someone who might be a parent, like myself, talking about how they really appreciate how they're supported as a working parent, it's great work-life balance. There's never, I'm not saying that you can't have work-life balance in a scaling environment, but these little hints and little proofs of culture can really help candidates select in or out. So therefore, you're going to have a better culture fit, meaning culture fit that doesn't negate diversity, equity, and inclusion, more just somebody who's going to be happy there, and therefore you can retain them. And also in stories content, we have great metrics on seeing more applications, more engagement, more social media hits. So you can get more, and you can get more on point with stories.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. That's great insights, because obviously, recruitment marketing has its place, and people are pulling on all kinds of means, whether it be blogs, articles, banners, you name it. So when it comes, I know that the focal area at the moment, and it has been quite a while, since COVID actually struck, the focus area is really about reattaching employees back to the values that reside within companies' employer value propositions. Because there's almost been, or there has been, a shift between people actually becoming detached from their value proposition and their culture and what it really is like to work for the organization. They almost need to be reattached, for want of a better word. Now, what has Stories actually done to assist companies to reconnect that sense of purpose, belonging, meaning, impact with people working in a dispersed, working environment now? Yeah, any words around that, Jessica?
Absolutely. So I'll have two ways to answer that one. Number one is candidates really want to hear how companies took care of their team members during the pandemic, no matter where you are, because how a company cared for its employees during an unprecedented global pandemic that sounds like it's from a sci-fi novel, that really says a lot about your real culture. When you have to do the unexpected, your true colors come out, right? So we're able to capture those stories since COVID-19, and therefore it really can show great culture. And then also we're capturing stories virtually. So now we can help people connect with how their culture looks now, how it looks to work from your home, and how employees can connect virtually. So stories are doing that on a whole new level and helping employees reconnect, and also candidates connect with the culture, because those stories can show how a company came together during a wild and crazy time.
Wonderful. And I think it takes it back to the fact that with the whole COVID shift as well, there was huge exposure to, diversity and inclusion and remote online learning, the whole internal mobility as well when it comes to career growth for people, especially being triggered by the fact that people had to upskill themselves very quickly, having to move into a remote environment. And what I'm doing is I'm sort of touching on the burning areas that has been exposed through the whole pandemic. The whole employee mental and financial well-being as well. And I think, that if you are a candidate, you're wanting to understand how companies are in fact looking after all these areas that have sort of come to the forefront,
Absolutely.
With the whole COVID thing and the social disconnect, the social disparities as well. you know, your environment and background quite different to mine. And, you know, what are companies doing to actually accommodate that? And as they say, talk is cheap until you actually see it in motion. And I think that's what really got me to bring you in today, is to actually make it a reality.
Absolutely. You can, you know, read anything or even hear leadership say anything in a studio wearing a suit, the CEO, right? Yes. But when you hear an employee speak authentically, that's such a great indicator of real culture. And although the pandemic has been horrible, I mean, just horrible, on the same time, it forced companies to really think about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in a whole new way, because now all of your remote employees, your dispersed employees, they were brought into the culture, and we were all dispersed now. So now the person who didn't work in the central office, who was working remote, you know, in the extra room at the house, you know, and wasn't there for birthday cake in the conference room and for the parties and such. Now we all could be connected together. Those geographical barriers have come down. So that if there's any silver lining, there's that. And we have learned at Stories Inc. how we can capture that virtual culture and help companies be better in their communications.
Wonderful. It's almost like pull the barriers down and said, let's look beyond the workplace. Let's have a look at you as an individual at home and what your interests are. You know, whether it be a big, beautiful bouquet of flower arrangement that you've made behind you. All of a sudden, I realized that Jessica does flower arranging, for example. You know, those kind of just, you know, I mean, just for a complete bizarre sort of.
A lot of dirty dishes and children and 3 pets, you know.
So yeah, so it's really getting to know people a little bit more by virtue of telling those stories. So we've chatted, and I've looked at quite a number of brilliant examples on Stories Inc.'s YouTube of the different stories that you've in fact captured, whether it be diversity and inclusion, LGBTQ, whether it be, you know, candidate experience, or a number of different clips that you've got on there. And again, my emphasis was when bringing you in to say, don't give me the big glitzy, you know, the glitzy examples in that. Give me a reality check of, or a story that you did, which can give our local market some kind of insight on how they can actually leverage as an emerging market in this space on stories. So I love this story. I know it is a big brand, but if you can just, if you can outline it.
Sure. So it was February 2020, and we were going to capture stories from employees who worked in Philips' main United States office. So Philips, the big medical lighting conglomerate, if you will. And we were hired to just capture the stories of the United States employee experience in their main office, which is really gorgeous, right? But then the pandemic hit. We couldn't get on an airplane. We couldn't have employees come to the office. It was completely unsafe. But Philips and Stories Inc. worked together. We didn't want to put the project on hold, especially in light of what we learned about how long COVID-19 would be with us. So we decided to capture all of the employee stories virtually from their homes. And in doing so, now that we were going to capture stories from employees at their houses working remotely, we could expand the project to include a bunch of employees that were working in Latin America. So here's a woman who shared her stories with us, and she was working in Puerto Rico. And we also captured stories of employees in Panama and Mexico and Brazil. And I'm not talking about people who were working at a fancy condo complex in Mexico City with perfect Wi-Fi. We got real employee experiences and therefore could communicate the employee experience of employees who were working in emerging markets and really communicate a global culture. And it didn't have to be glitzy and fancy with the camera crews. We sent, we did tech run-throughs with employees. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we did tech employee run-throughs. And if an employee's webcam for their virtual stories wasn't perfect, we could send them a webcam. We could capture employee stories no matter what.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I think, again, it's fantastic that with technology, we can actually get that reach so much better in order to capture, these advantage points and everything. So to our audience, I urge you to go onto Stories Inc.'s YouTube channel, because there's fantastic examples of employee testimonials, or just working from home, kind of real experiences of how people are working in a remote environment and what it meant to them.
Yeah, we call those our virtual story sessions.
Yes.
So if someone's interested in the content examples that focus on just the ones that we've captured from employees working from home. So you could look for the virtual story sessions. And then also, it doesn't have to be just a straight shot of an employee with her same background talking about, I like working here. You can really bring the story to life by adding, B-roll footage you already have, adding some photography, adding some graphics. You can use a videographer if you want, and you can use a professional editor, or you can do it yourself, so you can see some examples to hopefully help inspire. Okay,
brilliant. Super. So I know that this is a burning question that many of our people are going to be asking in terms of, do you have any tips to assist them in executing, on their first stories projects? Because it all makes such sense, but, if you're completely green and you've never done this before, and you might very well believe and are completely converted when it comes to understanding that recruitment marketing is so essential. But, where do you start when it comes to actually starting to build some kind of a story?
Well, my easiest, I could talk about this forever. And, I wish I could just brew a pot of coffee for everybody. But the main tips from Stories Inc. that we have found that result in the most engaging dynamic content are, number one, you want to make sure that you facilitate an interview if you want great real stories to emerge. So it's one thing just to tell a team member, hey, can you get on camera and tell some stories? It's not going to be the same as when you have a conversation and you interview someone and you draw them out. Additionally, when you have a conversation and you facilitate an interview, you can help the storyteller feel comfortable. So you can help them feel natural. It's so much more natural to, I don't know if you ever recorded a standalone video on your own and you do it 20 different times, oh, that sounded, or even recording your intro message on your voice. Right? So, but if Celeste and I are having a conversation and she asks me stories, it's just so natural, and that will come through in the resulting content that you have. And additionally, always do a tech run through with your storytellers. You can lightly prepare them. You can make sure their angles are good. You can make sure their lighting is great. And that way, and you can also practice hitting the record button. It's such we've all done it in that, you make a video and you forgot to hit record. So you're going to help your storyteller have all that stress taken off their plate by doing that tech run through with them. And then you can also check your tech. And if you need better tech than what you have in that virtual story session, you can get another webcam. Everybody's computers are different. Everybody's software works differently. So by doing that tech run through, you can see what you need. And then another pro tip, which is a fun one, is that this picture of Christian here on your slide, he's my colleague, and he's actually our head of photography and editing and everything. So looks really fancy schmancy, right? In that office behind him, it looks like he's working someplace really cool. That's actually a fake background. He that's part of a video he did with a green screen. So you can buy a green screen on Amazon or at your local store, and then send that, it wraps up real small, send that to your storytellers. And therefore, if they feel a little self-conscious that their place is messy in the background, or they have children running around, or what have you, or if you just want a consistent look across all of your storytellers so they have a similar background, you can do that. It's very easy. And so that little picture shows one of our pro tips on green screen usage.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. And I think I've been privy to that, where I've done so many takes when it comes to trying to do your own personal interview or your own personal introduction to your website that you're building or something to that effect. We're so critical, and we're so judgmental of ourselves in that. But I think from what I'm hearing is, if you can give some guided scripting without it being too clipped and too unnatural and not authentic, I think that also helps, just to give, your interviewee some kind of structure to follow, at least. I know that, in our market, the recruiters are starting to move into that area a little bit, with not using job boards and putting print media job descriptions on there, but actually starting to move very warily, I must say, but because it's obviously a whole new ball game, that lack of confidence to be able to move into the space of, okay, let me tell you what it's like to work here and work with my team and work with this hiring manager and what the job really entails. I think there are a few out there, but again, I think there's missed opportunity for recruiters and talent acquisition specialists to be that much more deliberate in actually starting to vocalize what the job's all about. I think as soon as we start seeing a shift with one or two agencies doing that, I think it will be very commendable, but I also think it will add a lot of value for an organization to be able, if they see the talent acquisition specialist has got confidence, to be able to then pull his or her hiring manager in, then one or two team members, and almost bring that whole job description alive by virtue of bringing role players in, right?
Absolutely. And you can repurpose that content. So you can have that hiring manager and that team content can be specific because you want someone to join that team and connect with the team. And as a candidate, it's so great to see, I'll work with those people. Wow, they seem like we will really mesh well together. But then you can use that as overarching culture content too. So stories are very repurposable. So just because Jane Smith is a hiring manager and she told her story, that's great for that job description, but it's also great for just talking about the company in general. Yeah,
completely. And we'll go on to that slide, Jessica. We put it together on how you can, again, out of sight is out of mind. The fact that, as I said, you need to, if you want to elevate your brand, if you want to be noticed, and we're talking about not just externally, but repositioning and re-energizing your brand internally, you have to keep repositioning and re-embedding it. And allowing your employees to actually say, yes, I can relate to that pillar of strength in my EVP, because that's what went down today. So a real story. I can resonate with that behavior. My colleague did this, or my colleague did that, or I did this. So all of a sudden you're starting to see behaviors play out. And no better way than to actually do it by way of, let me tell you about what happened today, kind of thing, a real story.
Yeah.
So,
you can take those pillars of an EVP and ask any team member, what does work-life balance mean to you? What does loyalty mean to you? What does service mean to you? Tell us a story of when you experienced loyalty in your company. Tell us a time when that really came through for you, and sit back, because the story that you're going to get from that is going to be better than any wordsmithing you can do as a marketer, I believe. And I'm somebody who comes to this from marketing. I'm an old lady who's worked in marketing a long time. And I get so excited by employer branding, where other people come to this space, I think, from human resources often. So when you put your marketing hat on and you have stories, it's just as magical.
I think that's where that's obviously where talent acquisition, HR is all shifting to. It's really about showing your mettle in terms of innovation, creativity, and pulling on these tools, pulling on these resources, starting to make it less transactional and make it far more creative in your thinking, because that's definitely going to give you the competitive edge. And I know this was one of the questions, what would you advise in order to keep employer branding front of mind? I mean, we've spoken about this, but I think that's really it, is we've got your conventional tools and channels that you use, but just doing this can actually really differentiate you.
Absolutely. And stories are wonderful content for all of your channels. So you might create a video with your career site in mind. I need to have the company culture video on my career site. I need to have a diversity and inclusion video on my diversity inclusion navigation tab. But don't always think outside the box. Make sure that you share those stories also to your social channels, that you share them in your talent community nurture, that you share them on your Glassdoor and employer review sites, and then also share them throughout the company. It's exciting to get everybody on board in your organization with the employer brand. Make everybody part of the recruitment marketing campaign, because that content, they can use it too, as this little graphic we have can illustrate. You can share them and then everybody can benefit from it. You can even have a viewing party with the organization on Zoom or in person, depending on how safe things are, and everybody can get excited by the content you create.
Completely. And I think that's the best thing, is that, a lot of people, a lot of your sort of talent leaders and that, they always say, where am I going to, I'm trying to find people at the moment to fill this role. Where am I going to get time to be creative, innovative, start writing copy content, start putting stuff together like this? But I think if they can see or understand that once you've put something together, how much you can leverage off that and how much usage you can get out of it by actually interweaving it through all the various departments within your organization and starting to build up an artillery of ammunition, what a pleasure, so the employee story doesn't have to just sit at talent acquisition. It can, in fact, move into onboarding. It can move into leadership and development, to say, you could have a leader saying, this is where Jessica started as a graduate, and look at where she is now, just by the story that they actually broadcast. So there's a lot to be said about that.
And also, a last little thing I would want to say about this is, don't discount how honored and excited employees are when they're asked to share their stories. it is such an employee recognition pinpoint that we have found. Employees are so excited. We just captured some stories of nurses at a big hospital in Louisiana. It was rural, so, it doesn't have to be something on Grey's Anatomy, You guys get Grey's Anatomy out there?
Yes, you do.
Or ER or Young and the Restless or whatever. So we captured these stories and everybody got their hair done. Everybody was so excited. It's one thing to give someone an employee recognition gift card or a certificate and send an email like, yay, employee of the month. But wow, the recognition that these nurses felt when they were asked to, instead of going to help their patients, come to the camera and we're going to capture your stories. I mean, I get tears in my eyes thinking about it because they work so hard. And wow, that we could help them feel even better about their great jobs as they're working in a pandemic. So I could get real schmaltzy about it all.
That's a fantastic example. And I think, again, it's about employee recognition. It's about employee engagement, but it's also putting them on the front line and saying, we can't actually be a successful company without you guys, and let them be the voice of the organization in real sense.
Absolutely. And we're doing employee recognition programs, formal. I mean, anytime you ask an employee for their story, it makes them feel great. But also, if you have an employee recognition program, sometimes we're brought in to capture those stories, and it makes them feel, it really bumps up the recognition they were already going to receive from the established program by us creating a video or a blog post or a photograph, just anything that makes them, highlights their hard work, since most of us just kind of work in our vacuum, and to have someone say you're doing an amazing job and we want to highlight you. And it just is goes in this beautiful cycle of stories emerging.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I think more and more people are talking about that sense of purpose, the sense of belonging, the kind of impact, and how do they actually contribute to the big picture within an organization. And, if they can tell that story, it's not only an educational piece, it's not only an educational piece within, internally to be able to position, but it's also a way of further educating and informing on your brand externally.
Totally. Yeah.
So I don't know what happened to our slide there. We had a bit of scribbling. Okay. Right. The next.
Good underlining.
Yeah, good underlining there. I don't know why I can't move to the next slide. There we go. So again, in terms of the opportunities, it's absolutely limitless on what you can do with stories. And it doesn't only, traditionally, you've always got, the employee sort of video that sits on your career site. But I think more and more, the whole thing around recruitment and the whole thing around internal engagement, and that's becoming that much more calculating. So, the persona categories, for example, we spoke about, being quite specific about possibly a job within a department that you possibly are looking at recruiting for. And it's not, again, about the skills and the qualifications only. It's also about what makes that department's heartbeat move, and what kind of a leader, what's this personality of this leader that I'm going to be reporting into? Am I going to like this person? Am I going to be supported by this person? So bring that individual in and see whether it's the kind of character you can work with. Likewise, the team members as well, which we spoke about, and the kind of projects they're going to be working on. So the persona is so important, taking a deep dive there and not just having that holistic employer brand, taking a dive there. And then also the career advancement. You know, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? You know, it's all about continuous learning, ongoing development, and what is my career path? You might have 3 positions that you are juggling. You know, I mean, that's the trend now, is you don't have one job, you have about 3 to 5 jobs, but still you might very well want to develop yourself within an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different career mobility stories you can tell. Somebody who's really gone up the ladder, or somebody who was already in an organization and wanted to try something new, didn't leave the organization to try something new, tried something new within the organization and they were retained. Or somebody who loves what they're doing and they just want to go deeper. So often you'll see that in technical and science. You know, someone doesn't want to become, you know, the C-level. They just really want to do the research. They want to stay there and learn. So, you know, professional development means so many things to different people, and whatever your culture can truly provide, you can capture those stories.
Yeah. And you know what I'm also thinking as you're speaking about this, Jessica, is that we've been conducting quite a few focus groups at the moment. And what we do is we obviously define, you know, what is rewards and recognition for you. It might be quite different to you as it is to me. So when you're articulating or telling that story, you need to actually define what it really is, because you might think one thing as a candidate applying for a job, and meanwhile, it's something completely different. So stories gives or provides an opportunity to further unpack and define what rewards and recognition is all about.
Right.
So again, you know, instead of words, written words, I'm telling you this now in person. Rewards and recognition is about A, B, C, D, and E. This is what we do. That's how we look at it. That's how we recognize it within our organization. So again, I think it also aligns your people to everyone's way of thinking, right?
Yeah. And what kind of support you receive. Those are always great stories to hear. We've captured some great stories lately that talk about how maybe a manager saw the potential in an employee and supported them in their journey. And if you have a culture that wants to support you and lift you up, rather than just suck you dry, you have to capture those stories too.
Yeah, completely. Wonderful. I think we're on the last. I can't move on here. Yeah, we're on the last. Shame, your whole face has been scribbled out here. I don't know what happened. I don't know if someone got carried away with our presentation here.
That's modern art. I love it.
Okay, there we go. So, questions and answers. Has anyone got any questions or answers, or questions that you want answered by us? Let me look in my chat box. I don't see anything. I've got a quiet audience here today.
Ooh. I have a question for you, Celeste, if no one else. So I know you're doing a lot of EVP work in the African market, especially because I'm really a student of learning this region of employer branding there. How do you see stories helping bring EVPs to life for companies in Africa?
That's a very good question, because, you know, if I have a look at the stories that are being told within focus groups, they are so real and they're so inspiring, and they actually bring the organization to life just by virtue of asking them. So give me an example of where you feel you were recognized, or where do you feel that the company can do that much better in recognizing. Now, those stories in itself will assist one. That's a perfect example of how the values and the cultures come to life. And again, you know, the internalization and the whole employee engagement exercise that many companies are doing at the moment is really about defining and fine-tuning whether they are, in fact, meeting the demands and the needs of their people. And if you've got that endorsement from your employees to say, yes, I am getting the rewards and the recognition by way of a story, I think it holds a lot of value because it's transparent and it's employee generated. It's not by the leadership or the exco saying the ideal scenario.
That's really interesting that you're using stories at the beginning of the process to help, really identify it. Oh, we saw some beautiful woman.
Hello, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. Hi, Celeste. Hi, Jessica. Thank you. I'm listening. I actually have a question.
Absolutely.
In terms of stories, how do you make employees who are already feeling negative about the organization to come to the party?
Oh.
More engaged in the organization?
I think that's a question for you, Celeste, more because we are content creators and that's more organizational work.
I think there it's a very good question because I think it's really about taking a deep dive into understanding where the area of unhappiness is. In this day and age, it could be anything. It could be material. It could be the softer issues around I'm not getting the empathy that I would like from my leader. But then it could be a material thing. It could be something around I don't have the data connectivity at home, so I don't feel like I'm delivering sufficiently on the job at hand. So I think it's really about distilling where the problem areas lie, because you don't want that to obviously spark fires in other areas or between the rest of your team members either. And sometimes it does take an impartial party to take a little bit of a digger deep, a bit of a deeper dive to get that understanding, Rebecca, in order to, rectify the situation. And then also you need to ensure that they have a safe space to be able to articulate that and not be pinpointed for being vocal about their unhappiness. I hope that's helped you.
In the United States, we see this right now with companies seeming to wake up to diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism as a big problem, whereas a lot of employees have said, this has been a historic problem in our country. And so we have advised when creating diversity, equity, and inclusion content, and that can be about just inclusion and belonging in culture, even if it's not related to racism or sexism or other isms, address the problem head on and show that you are on the journey to be better. So we have helped companies do that rather than hiding it and then only showing the employees that are happy,
That's right.
really having that's where you bring leadership out. Usually we like to focus on, the employees that give a really broad picture of the company, but sometimes it's very effective to have leadership come and tell their own story of the book they're reading and the lecture they attended and what they're doing and who they're hiring and everything that they're doing to address the problem. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
and I think another thing as well that I'm finding is that, through doing audits of EVPs and that, the honesty and the transparency really comes about when you've got leaders basically saying, I resonate with the fact that we're not there yet, but it's a desired culture that my employees are saying they are wanting to aspire to. They want that culture. They want that as part of the DNA in their organization. We might not be there yet, but can we please put it on the radar, because we want to make deliberate efforts of reaching that desired culture, which everyone is asking for. Yeah? So I think it's also about being bold enough to say, we're not there yet, but we want to be there. And then when we get there, we can tell the story behind how we got there, right? Because we're not all perfect. Yeah? Okay, are there any other questions? Alzette, do you want to have something to say there?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. There's one in the chat. Do you see these in the chat list? We have
Oh, deliberate effort to reach the desired goals. That's true. That's from Rebecca, yes.
So I see one from Lisa Abbott here in the chat, and I'm going to read it. I should have brought my glasses, sorry. Do you think there will be as much of a need for higher production video storytelling after the pandemic, or has user-generated content become the more preferred authentic medium? Ooh, I love this.
That's your question, Jessica.
I love this question. So we're having a great time, especially right now in the United States, where like they just said like, you don't have to wear a mask. And then some companies are like, let's go back into the office. And other places are like, I'm scared. Or some places are going like to be like GitLab, and they're like, we're going to be all remote. And some places are giving employees a hybrid workforce, employee choice, if you will. If you can work from home or you can come in. And of course, a lot of the essential workers have always been in the workplace. So we like to weave them all together to give a very 2021 forward thinking and forward looking and real view of culture. So we at Stories Inc. are weaving together virtual story sessions with on-site production. I think that you can weave them together and you can just film the employees where they naturally are. So I think that now we are having much more of an option to do the fancy camera in the workplace than we did a few months ago. But I think that now we have opened it up to be able to capture stories virtually beautifully too. Again, like we said, that can break down a lot of the geographic barriers. It can contribute to inclusion because now you can capture your employees wherever they are. And so I think that the production value can always be high in post-production, even if the story you're capturing from storyteller A is just very natural, easy, done remotely from the house. Later on, you can really honor the stories by adding captions, by adding lower third graphics, by weaving in your B-roll, and those things that we at Stories Incorporated like to do, and weaving different stories together. So your ideal company culture video, if you have both a remote workforce and a in-office workforce, and you wanted to have a great, beautiful culture video for your career site, I would love to see both of those together.
Yeah. I hope that's answered your question, Lisa.
Yeah. Oh, she says thanks. Okay. I would love to talk about that forever. I got really excited, sorry.
No, that's great. And I think it's about, again, authenticity. How are you bringing? I know that in the essential services and essential goods arena, and that you've got business as usual, where on the production lines you've got the contract, or you've got the workers, the factory workers and the plant workers that have to be there on the machines around the clock and everything. But then, they're saying, well, it's unfair because I've got, your functional support employees are sitting comfy at home with their data and everything, and they don't need to go into work. So I think it's really about, the authenticity between capturing and understanding where these two worlds meet. you know, so yeah. Thank you so much for being part of our African continent, and we'll keep in touch with you, and please feel free to reach out to myself or to Jessica, and do yourself a favor and have a look at those videos, because it will, or the story videos, because it will further elaborate what you can do creatively in this space when it comes to elevating your employer brands and running good recruitment marketing campaigns, and more importantly, embedding the sense of pride that your employees want to have in connecting with your values and your culture. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Only a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.